let's start saying words.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming along. So this was billed as a talk, and when we got here, we decided to turn this into an impromptu small panel. So I'm joined with Andrew here. So I'm George Buckenham from Sensible Object. He made Beast of Balance. This is Andrew, who I work with. Do you want to say some things about yourself?
My name is Andrew. I'm a growth marketing manager at Sensible Object. I do a lot of the data management stuff, and I also did a bunch of writing on both our voice originals and Beast of Balance titles. So yeah, kind of somewhere between the finance side and the game design side.
Yeah. So I don't know how many people are familiar with Sensible Object, the company we're from, kind of games there. I'll just continue saying things about it because not all of you do. So Sensible Object, we're about 4 years old. We're a startup who are making board games that use technology as part of it. So our first game was Beasts of Balance, and yeah, so first game was Beasts of Balance, which is a app-connected game where there's some actual hardware, some electronics in this like platform. You stack animals up, and then animals appear in a tablet. So yeah, that's the first thing we've made.
So then we also went on from Beast of Balance to create the Battles expansion pack. So from there, we added an extra layer of competitive elements based on the feedback that kind of went through from our first cooperative game. With that, we released a whole bunch of new pieces and sort of went through the same kind of iterative design process we went through for the original cooperative version of the game. And then from there, we also were selected by the Amazon Alexa Fund for the Alexa Accelerator, and I think we were the only UK company to be selected for that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I think certainly the only tabletop company as well, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, so that was a sort of like a couple of weeks out in Seattle, or actually a couple of months out in Seattle, where we put together some prototypes for voice interaction board games. So, and George has been doing a whole bunch of work on that, so I'll let them take a little bit more of that.
Yeah. So I guess basically the point is that we're a company that's all about putting technology in board games, and so it's weird. I find it's a weird thing to do, and there's some like non-obvious things that come out of it. So hopefully this should be interesting in kind of delving about some of the kind of thoughts we've had, which is obviously now completely normal for us, but hopefully we can kind of communicate some of this weirdness. So actually I'll talk a bit about my background because I think this is kind of interesting. So I come from indie video games. So my background, I've run events and I've made kind of my own games. But yeah, very much from this kind of indie video games thing. And I think a lot of people making board games also have this kind of background. And so one thing I kind of was really interested in there was making video games that have custom hardware, weird, novel controller inputs. So obviously when I started working on Beasts of Balance, I was like, cool, we're making a video game that has a weird controller. And it took, like about a year of working on it to go kind of like, maybe it's actually a board game. And it's kind of interesting because like, what counts as a video game and what counts as a board game in this kind of, what's a board game with technology versus a video game that you play as a local multiplayer thing. So I think that's kind of interesting. And in fact, afterwards, our perception of that kind of has evolved, or my perception of it. And now I would probably say that Beasts of Balance is more of a toy, at least in its co-op mode, than it is a board game. And again, there's a weird, like, what counts as a toy versus a board game? Or, I don't know. So there's something interesting there. And I think the kind of, I don't know, there's something, I always find it really interesting to poke at definitions and like say, okay, this is the definition of one thing, this is the definition of another thing, and then you try to find the weird edge cases in the middle where it's hard to define a thing, and then you're like, maybe there's some interesting work to be done on this kind of stuff. How does it feel to you to be working at a company? What do you think you're working on?
So I think what was really interesting, because I joined the company in late 2016 before we'd actually released Beast of Balance. So I think we were kind of having those kind of ontological discussions like as a company. And our head of marketing kind of said to me, "Is it a toy? Is it a game? What do you think, Andrew?" And I was like, "This is my first job. I don't know. It seems like a game. It seems like a toy." But I think because I started my career at this company, it seems very like a natural progression to sort of just start thinking about the digital, physical kind of as its own thing. As you say, there's a lot of different kind of interactions that you need to think about. But being close to the development of Battles, which was very much focused around, soft competitive elements with some kind of cooperative, you're trying to build the same tower, but you're also trying to win at the same time. You kind of have to take each game itself as its kind of own thing and kind of explore the systems that make it all work and make it fun. So there is, I wouldn't say there's like a one-size-fits-all approach to digital or physical games, but you kind of have to, adopt a mindset of how can we push what technology allows us to do within the context of either a tabletop game or a toy, or just think about how people will use it and then optimize that and make it super fun and test it over and over and over.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the thing of every game, kind of, as you work on it, you figure out what it's about, and then you have to stay true to that and refine it and stuff like that. So I think that's always kind of the case. So yeah, I mean, I guess actually I'm going to talk quickly about how I see those definitions. That might be a useful thing to do. So, and this is slightly vague, but I guess the feeling is, in a video game, the game exists inside the computer, and you're interacting with it. But I think a big difference with a board game is, in a board game, the game exists inside your head, or inside the heads of all of the players, and then there's a shared state you keep up to date. So with a video game, you can start playing immediately, whereas with a board game, you can only play once you understand how the game works, at least to some extent. And you need to do that kind of loading the information to your head and having the shared understanding before you can play. So I think it's interesting to see the fact that we released a board game and it has no instruction booklet. Like, so Beast of Balance has no instruction booklet. It just has a sticker on the top saying, install the app, launch it, and then the tutorial exists within that. And with When in Rome, we do have an instruction booklet, and on like page 4 of the instruction booklet, it says you don't need to read the instruction booklet. It's here just in case you want to, but just start playing. Really, that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly a process of working out what those key points were. We're doing digital design, so we have to really spend a bunch of time planning before we start coding. So we still did a bunch of paper play testing and that kind of thing to work out what those points of discovery and hooks are in both games, When in Rome and Beasts of Balance. But it's kind of fun being able to iterate on that and load the game slowly into someone's brain as they kind of get it. And it's an experience that I have a lot of fun with when I'm demoing the game for the first time. So I'm kind of being the human tutorial, and I use that experience as we were designing the tutorial flow for our Battles expansion pack, which is slightly more complex and requires a little more downloading. Yeah,
exactly. And like there's a I don't know, just come from the show floor where we're doing demos and like doing the thing of like, okay, try playing this piece, it does something cool. Is I think an experience you can't get actually demoing board games normally, just saying do this thing, it'll do something cool, because normally you say do this thing and then you have to explain why it happens, or you have to have the context, but instead you do something and then it does something cool and you're like, oh cool, I understand this. So I don't know, I think that's exciting. I think the note of kind of caution I'd say against this is that even in video games, the game still exists in people's heads. If you make a video game and you can't understand it, then it's going to be a weird game and probably unsuccessful and probably not fun. I'm sure there's counterexamples, but you still in a video game make a mental model of the game, and that's the thing that exists in your head. That's why you are able to look at some information coming to you from the screen and then make a plan based on that information and then act, and then maybe you succeed and maybe you don't, and maybe that model gets refined. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about When in Rome, sort of like the how that platform changes a little bit with voice, maybe exploring that.
So the main thing I'd say about so When in Rome is this game that's powered by Alexa. So you're traveling around the world, answering questions given to you by locals in all the different cities. I think the main thing I'd say with working with voice is that it's a massive pain in the arse. It's just like there's a particular kind of interaction paradigm you need to work within, which is not based around playing board games. It turns out Amazon did not make Alexa to play board games. So you've got to start an interaction by saying, Alexa, open When in Rome, and then you can then say stuff that Alexa will pick up. But for example, when we respond, we can have some stuff that Alexa can say. We can give up to 90 seconds worth of audio, and then once that's done, Alexa will listen for, I think, exactly 15 seconds, and if you don't respond within that, she'll say something else, but if you don't respond after that, then it quits out the skill. So if you're playing continuously, you always have to slot stuff into this like 90 seconds worth of audio, and then waiting for a response, and everything has to fit around that framework. So it can't just sit in the background and prod in occasionally. It can't you can't like set a timer and say, okay, in 5 minutes it will wake up, or it will say something unexpectedly whilst other people are doing stuff. It's kind of this weird constraint to work around.
I think the other thing that's interesting about voice as well is that kind of changes the kind of games that you make, and that kind of the tempo of the game. One of the favorite stories that came out of the Alexa Accelerator was our founder. There was another like tool or game. There was like an Alexa connected bouncing ball. And there were a bunch of 10-year-olds who did this big play test, and they were running around, bouncing this ball around and having this ridiculous, raucous time. And we were concerned that these 10-year-olds were going to come and sit around this Alexa board game that's quite slow, it's quite conversational, you can't interact and interrupt in the same way. But the technology and the interaction patterns kind of absorbed them in a way that was really fascinating. They kind of sat there politely, and they were sort of listening to the game as it was happening and sort of responding politely to the device. And yeah, one of them at the end of it said, "Oh, I would just love to do this at the end of dinner, just to simmer down after a long day."
That's a really like cultured 10-year-old.
Yeah, but but the whole that was the weird thing about it was it's sort of like the technology and the interaction pace and the model has a huge impact on the kind of games that you can play, but also what games make sense to do with that voice interaction, right? It's conversational. It's that's it's something I thought was quite interesting.
I keep trying to think about how to make voice work with playing the crossword. It feels like it's like a similar activity.
Yeah.
That doesn't quite work, but something like that where you're kind of sitting in it. And actually, also, I think the other thing is like voice is interesting because it's a thing that's like ambiently in your house and kind of exists there anyway. So there's kind of something, I don't know, something really interesting about that. Again, I kind of talking about kind of the boundaries between stuff, and I think it's interesting seeing the kind of difference between what video games can do and what board games can do, and kind of I don't know. I think it's super rich to kind of see what can we steal from one, what can we do from the other. So like another thing that you can do with video games that's harder to do in board games is have something surprising happen. Have something that you normally in a board game, here's the rules. Put all the rules into your head, and then now you play the game, and there can definitely be surprise. You can get unexpected interactions of that. You're like, oh, I see why this auction mechanic makes sense with this thing, and actually if I build up my stables, then I'll be able to do this thing, and that's a consequence of it, and that feels great, and figuring that stuff feels great, but it's harder to do just, you go to a new area and there's a new thing there. So I don't know, it feels like thinking this way is kind of productive, because once you think this way, you're like, how can I put surprise in? You're like, well, maybe you invent legacy games. That's a place where surprise comes into board games, and you can do the same kind of thing. Have you played legacy games? I have not actually played any.
No, I haven't either. Not to a huge extent, but I was on the show floor and I saw there's a werewolf legacy game. I think it's kind of interesting that you kind of there's a preset path that kind of interacts, and that idea of a game learning with you is very cool.
It's interesting.
Totally
like board games having spoilers. That feels wild. And like board games having things where people have this kind of really divergent experience. So I think it's interesting where you can kind of get the same effect using just the kind of traditional board game techniques. And like similarly from video games, it's kind of interesting to see video games where there are these social rules that are enforced by the players, not by the computer enforcing it. There's an indie video game called Asphyx. And so this game works it's like a platformer game with like a load of water, and the rules are, if you're playing it, you've got to hold your breath when your character is underwater. So naturally this means like your character never drowns, but you go under the water and you hold your breath, and then you're trying to race through to get to the next section before you like finally have to, and there's a button you can press saying like, I took a breath when I wasn't supposed to, and then your character dies. It's interesting how it can kind of go the other way. You're like, oh, okay, so this is an interesting property of board games versus video games, is that, in board games, players have to enforce stuff. And now suddenly you can apply that to computer games, and there's kind of a design thing, because that's not what people are expecting, but there's something interesting there. Or it's interesting to consider, like, if you're using something like a Tabletop Simulator or Roll20, are you playing a board game or a video game? What are you playing? Go on.
I don't know. That might be a question for you guys. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Hands up for board game. Hands up for video game.
Yeah, it's kind of both, but yeah, exactly. It's hard to define. It's hard to sort of like.
Yeah, but so that's still with technology.
Because the tabletop simulator, like you're talking about, you actually manipulate all the pieces on the board just like you were playing the game. So the computer doesn't actually do anything for you most of the time.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, it's that. That's kind of the tough thing when you're trying to define what you're actually playing.
But if you made a version of Tabletop Simulator where like some things happened automatically, like exactly how much does it have to go to cross from one to another?
Yeah, I know, right. Yeah, you actually roll the dice, you draw the cards, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's different than like an app on an iPad where the board game app.
Right.
Board game, but it does everything for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so we come into that with Board Game Geek where you're trying to log your play, and so if you log it into Board Game Geek or Video Game Geek, you know.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, like, maybe I'll take I guess the controversial thing, I can't actually remember which, but I would say that for us as a company, right, we're very interested in board games and tabletop because of, the face-to-face interactions that we have. I think with Tabletop Simulator, you're manipulating the kind of digital pieces, but you're doing it to a face to screen, and there's someone else somewhere with a screen. And I think for us at Sensible Object, what we're super interested in is using this kind of ambient technology that's in everyone's homes and in their pockets, and using it with physically designed pieces in a way that you couldn't have one without the other.
Yeah.
I think.
Like I always think, and I feel like this is an important thing that kind of guides me as a designer at Sensible Object, is I think about if you go around to somebody's place and you play Mario Kart, like you're sitting on a sofa, you're all looking at a TV screen, you might be like trash talking each other, but you're not looking each other in the eyes. You are all focusing on one object and you are not looking at each other. If you're playing a board game, there's an object in front of you, a board or whatever. Even with Beasts of Balance, there's even a screen there. But you're also looking at each other's eyes. You're sitting around a table, you're looking at a shared object together, and then you're interacting with each other in this kind of direct way. And for me, that's kind of the critical thing. We're making things where you sit around a table and you're looking at each other's faces, but it still uses technology. And that for me is what a sensible object game is and what we're kind of interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I'm just looking through the notes of interesting things I could say. So a thing I actually was considering doing a talk just on this topic is kind of related is cheating. I think maybe it's like board games are ones you can cheat in, or cheating means a very different thing in a video game to a board game. In a video game, you're cheating the system. Like you play a cheat, you type Rosebud into The Sims and get money. Like it's allowed. You can't do something immoral to a computer. But in a board game, you can cheat in a kind of really literal way, and you can also do the thing of like kind of fuzzy definitions of like somebody has forgotten a rule or something gets missed, or you give someone a do-over, or you're like no, it's okay, you can undo that thing, or you can unpick it, or say you just have some extra money, that'll balance it out and make the game better. And it feels like there's a interesting thing there. As well.
I mean, it's in a video game, kind of trying to work out those edge cases and like, okay, that's fine, we can go back. That's a near impossible thing to accomplish.
Yeah, like thinking about like what the UI would be for a video game where you can just arbitrarily change that stuff. Like it's a competitive one, but you're like, oh no, okay, well let's just undo this move and do a different thing. That feels impossible.
That was kind of interesting when we were developing Beast of Balance battles as well. We had this issue of what if someone accidentally knocks the tower over on someone else's turn? And what's the impact on the player? Are they going to sort of get cross at the game, or are they going to get cross at each other? Or what if someone realizes that if they just knock the tower over, they're going to win? And we were sort of legitimately concerned about this and how it would impact the game, and if people would just, think it would cheapen the experience. And then we started playtesting it, and we discovered that if someone knocks the tower over when they're going to win, no one wants to play with that person. So there is kind of like a self-regulating environment on what is an acceptable mistake and what is cheating, and what kind of demeans the game and demeans the kind of trust that's built between players when they're playing a tabletop game specifically.
yeah, there's a similar thing of like, yeah, I don't know, if you knock it over accidentally, then you scramble and help put it together, or you do that, I don't know. There's an interesting thing with, especially the co-op version of Beasts of Balance, where we deliberately don't keep track of what players are. We kind of suggest, we hint occasionally that you should take it in turns to play pieces. But it's kind of like, oh god, like I started imagining like doing UI for kind of the beginning, where you like say, cool, this is how many people are playing, this is the order people are going in, all of this kind of stuff, and then it's like, no, just let it exist there, and you can interact with it. And that's kind of why I now consider it a toy, because it's an object, and you can interact with it, and you can get interesting interactions from it, but you can choose how to play with it in a way that you can't really with you can with a board game, but it's kind of different. You don't just interact with it and see what fun, weird things can happen with a board game. Instead, you have particular rules. Whereas with this, it's an object you interact with, and it does something interesting. So yeah, I don't know. It means that people can naturally change what order they can go in, or they can get excited and jump ahead, or they can go for a piss or get a beer, and the game can continue because other people can jump in, or and I feel like that's a kind of powerful thing that we put in by just failing to do a bunch of difficult work.
I think the other thing that always surprises me is people are like, is this allowed? Can I do this? And I think, if you can work it out in a way that the game responds and lets you do something, even if you make a mistake, the game will still respond in a kind of like positive, like vaguely affirming way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very difficult thing to achieve in most ways.
Yeah, I don't really know how to explain to people on the demos that, like, am I allowed to use both hands? Can I rearrange it? I don't know. It feels like kind of weird to say, well, the computer doesn't know. But the computer doesn't know, and so it's kind of designed around, yes, you can do anything that's allowed. And if it collapses, the volcano comes up, you get a countdown. If that happens, then you need to scramble to satisfy the computer again. But anything you do physically is allowed. And I don't know, that feels like a weird, freeing thing to do. And so yeah, again, so I think there's also weirdly a different thing, which is we've talked a lot about kind of the fuzzy boundaries between video games and board games, but there's also just a lot of board games that use technology, but are very definitely board games in a way that actually Beasts of Balance is. I mean, again, I think it's more of a toy than a board game in this weird like semantic kind of thinking through stuff. So. Like Space Alert, for example, is kind of the classic example of it's this game where you're piloting a spaceship, and there's an audio track on in the background, and the audio track gives you the kind of things you have to respond to, so it's kind of real time in response to that. Like the Werewolf games, which use an app to kind of track that stuff, or to play audio stuff there. Again, this is kind of, it works according to board game rules, but it incorporates some technology, and that feels like it's, I don't know, a different thing. And definitely there's things like, even just an app that rolls a dice for you, gives you a random number. That's technically using technology. I guess dice are technically technology. Somebody had to invent the dice. I think they actually just I think they found animal knuckles, and then they rolled those, and then they were like, these aren't very fair, and that's where dice come from. So I guess they discovered dice, not found them. not invented them.
Really sort of
just going back in history, just a few tens of thousands of years.
Now we have iPads and Alexa.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Reading and writing, literacy, that's an invention, it's technology. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything to say about like that category of things?
In terms of what exactly, like discovering versus inventing?
No. Like, do you have anything to say about like board games that use technology in that way? I don't know.
I don't know. I think I've played. I played Mansions of Magus last week for the very first time, which was something that is referred to as like a physical digital game. And my instinct was like, it'd be nice if the game knew a little bit more about what was happening on the board. That might simplify the interactions a little bit. But I think that it was immersive in exciting ways, and it allowed a little bit of chance. I think the technology I think does a great job with introducing surprise through RNG and a bunch of other kind of mechanics that jump in there. But yeah, I think I'm not sure. That's kind of was my feeling, my experience. But I think what I'd love to see more of, and what we care very much about is like making those two things seem less disparate and more together and like connected, and kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is just. I think there's often a thing where people who do this, there's kind of, I don't know, different people working on both sides, and I think it's really important just to kind of take it for granted that everything you're doing is very normal, and then just try to again kind of solve the problem. And a game kind of defines itself. So I think if you then, I don't know, where those experiences are bad is where there is a board game and then somebody's shoehorned an app in, and the app is kind of outsourced or designed by somebody else, and that can feel weird and bad and unnecessary. Oh, we just made a sale. Just going to turn that down. Versus where, again, I'm just like blowing my own horn here, but like designing a thing and thinking about from the digital technology side, but thinking about what's the experience in the room? How do we make this good? How do we make this kind of seamless? How do we make a thing I'm weirdly really proud of in Beasts of Balance is that it involves using an iPad and connecting to a Bluetooth device, and we managed to make the experience of connecting to a Bluetooth device not suck. I'm so like we looked at all these other kind of Bluetooth connected things, and I'm like, every time we tested it out, I was like, the process for connecting really sucks. I'm going to do better than these people, and I feel very proud about that. But like that's a big part of the experience.
Adds to the magic as well, right? The sort of like narrative of the game is you are gods building a world, and you pull out this magical plinth, and you push a button, and it magically pairs with your device. Like I think the technology that's very supportive of the kind of gameplay experience, and that's really part of it.
Exactly. And like, I've got a whole other probably talk in me about how you can create magic in that kind of connected experience and the kind of stuff that's there. But yeah, I mean, just working kind of feels pretty important. Yeah. So there's one final thing I was going to talk about.
Just going to take a quick moment to reset the camera.
Apologies,
for some reason this camera only has a 30-minute timer, so I'm just going to push a button, push it again.
Anyway, so the final thing that I think is the really big difference between board games and video games is video games cost a lot more to make. Which seems kind of trivial, but it turns out technology is painful to do, and it's kind of weird because the costs also are at different places. The cost of developing and designing a board game is definitely not nothing, especially getting fancy art and that kind of stuff in. But mainly the costs for board games and kind of this stuff is in making each unit, whereas video games have this kind of natural thing of all of the cost is up front, and then once you've done that, if you're digitally distributing it, it's costs you nothing to sell each individual unit. And so kind of actually the other thing that's really difficult in trying to jam these two things together is finding out how the business models support each other. Do you have sell the board game, but then you've also got this huge extra cost you've got to do? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I mean, our solution to that was, I think a lot of particularly tabletop enthusiasts, when they pay for something, they want to get something that is cool and in a box that they can open and that kind of thing. So for us, if you purchase something from Sensible Object, you will get something in a box, right? And the digital upgrades, we put out the Battles expansion pack, which is a huge, development cost for us as a company.
Yeah, it took us a year.
Yeah, but as a free update to anyone who has the core set already.
Yeah.
But then as a means of increasing more people to get more out of that experience, we have expansion packs and we have add-on packs. You buy battle cards separately, and those add an additional layer of super awesome, fun gameplay to something that you might already have. So, I wouldn't call it a freemium model by any respect, because you have to buy this big box of stuff to begin with, but, there's a bunch of other cool things that we can do to make that experience of, that value, that creation of fun important, I think.
Yeah. And I don't know, weirdly, as a game designer, I find myself increasingly going it's actually game design is just about money, or just about dealing with people more than it's about game design. It's about how do you kind of reconcile these things, or how do you work within these parameters to make the best thing, and everything has to be weighed up against how much does it cost actually to produce this content or to manufacture it, or just endlessly going we can have these many components and that will add an extra 2 cents to our bill of materials. So maybe we can't because those 2 cents are crucial, which is or could be better spent elsewhere.
Which is probably that's there's similar costs in video game design. Do we have that feature? Do we drop this? Do we do that?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure there's similar constraints for physical production for board games as well. That's do we have this mechanic that uses this thing? Okay, actually we need a smaller box. Also this box costs this much to ship. There's a bunch of unexpected costs, and our designer Tim and our logistics manager Chris can tell you all about the intricacies of getting things in a box and on a boat and to someone, which have all these additional costs that aren't factored in when you build the thing.
So there's a great slideshow that Chris has, which just shows how our logistics has evolved over the company's life. It begins with here's the factory, here's a line representing a ship, goes to a warehouse, goes to a person, and now it's some huge spiderweb thing with 15 companies involved, each optimized for a particular thing, and we need to get this one here quicker, so we use air freight here, but that's not efficient for the bulk order, and we can use this warehouse here, which does this kind of fulfillment, but this other warehouse is the one that needs to get to this. Anyway, yeah. It's this
shipping physical
yeah.
stuff, which tabletop makers I'm sure appreciate. It's a tough thing to accomplish.
But it's kind of wild again coming from video games, having to suddenly go oh yeah, I can see the game I've made is on this ship. You can track it on a website, and you can see the ship traveling, and it's just rounding the Horn of Africa or. So I think that's kind of getting to the end of the stuff that we have to say. Do you have any questions? Does anyone else have any questions? With generally happy to
Are you guys aware of
Playtable? No, I'm not actually.
It's supposed to be coming out this holiday season. It's a tablet device that.
Oh, I have seen this, and it's got it uses RFID things, but it also does the positioning of the RFID things on that. I've seen a demo of that. That looks super cool. It looks super cool, but actually my head immediately, as soon as I saw a demo of it, I'm okay, but I know how much a bunch of these components cost. This is going to be, how much is it? Do you know?
Oh, I don't remember. I pre-ordered it a few years ago.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I'm just
hundreds of dollars.
Exactly, yeah. So it's you can buy this fancy table that allows you to play with these special miniatures, but also it has to be $500, $600 or something like that. And
it seems like they want it to be a platform, and then they want people to make games for it.
Right. Yeah. But then it's a weird thing, because how do you, if you're selling a thing for $500, it's going to be amazing to have enough people for there to be a platform for. So it's there's all this kind of exciting stuff you can do, but I mean, I come from doing video game events and stuff, so I was making a bunch of kind of one-off custom controller prototype things, and there's a bunch of stuff that makes sense there, that as soon as you go to, we can put it in a box and send it to people's house, and they can give us money for it, and that's a thing that anyone would want to do. Suddenly you're oh no, everything's very, very expensive, and it's very difficult to do this, which is why, frankly, the job I have is so amazing, because I'm getting to actually make stuff that people can buy, and it's weird technology games. That still feels wild and unreal to me.
Any other questions? Just broadly about us.
Can you talk for a second about how you put what technology you use in the Beast of Balance? Because they're little animals. I don't know if anyone's not seen it. But they each have a little sensor that you just touch to that.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is how do you figure that out? What's inside?
I mean, there was a long process of us getting to that core technology that George.
I kind of disagree.
Oh, really?
From the early prototype, it basically had the same stuff in.
But there was a bunch of wild ideas, there'd be computer vision, and that's how the thing would know. Or we do come up with these, intricate, kind of out there technologies. Maybe it's color recognition, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, we figured out the cheapest way to do it was with these core components.
Yeah. Okay. So each of the animals is injection molded 3D piece, often with a coating to give them a nice kind of tactile thing, and there's a chip that does RFID. And the chip just identifies this is the piece and it weighs this much. Those are the 2 bits of information. So in the base, in the plinth, there is a RFID reader. So you touch it there and it scans. There is a weight sensor. So obviously it knows how much the tower weighs, if it's collapsed, and that kind of updates 60 times a second or something like that. And there is a little Bluetooth system on a chip thing that communicates to those 2 things. And then the Bluetooth thing has all of the actual electronics, programming, interfacing with those 2 things, but it basically just sends out a stream of data over to the tablet. So yeah, that's basically how that works. And then the actual game is programmed in Unity and talks Bluetooth, so it works on Android and iOS. And it's from then on, it's like making a really UI heavy mobile game that has this weird extra data source in.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that we develop games for platforms that people already have, right? So there's a certain interaction expectation for how you might play with a tablet, or how a developing space of how you'd interact with a voice platform.
Yeah.
So we tap very much into the natural patterns of play that people have with those devices, and then mess with them a bit with animals and sharks with little bits of tech. Yeah.
Actually, the other thing to say, just with like the kind of wild ideas experimentation thing, is it felt like it was like a thing to discover that we were like, we're going to make a thing that's a balancing game that's going to use technology, and it was like, then we were like, no, we should just use the phones and tablets that people already have. That's where the game should run, rather than us including our own screen or doing any of that stuff, which again just comes down to cost. Like if we'd done that, then it would be several $100s, and frankly it would be a rubbish screen. And people have phones that they've spent hundreds of dollars on, so you might as well use the nice screen that's there and the nice computer that's there, rather than having our own rubbish version that you only use to play this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a vision of what Vista Balance could have been. I think you had a question as well?
Yeah, and it's more of like a conceptual thing, but I was thinking about house rules.
Yeah.
And if the technology would give you that option to set up your own house rules. We have a timed trivia game that we play with the grandparents and the grandkids, and we had to take the timing element out for grandma and grandpa. So things like that, and everybody always has some kind of house rule for some favorite game, and so that's something where I feel like there's got to be a lot more flexibility with the technology to include that kind of stuff. But I don't know.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. Like I know, I don't know. The best response I have for that is doing stuff like we do in Vista Balance, where there's a bunch of it which is really open-ended, like this whole thing of not knowing how many players there are, or ultimately people are always, if you design your game well, then people make up weird house rules, and that's a real joy to see that happen. But you can never like code in support for all of the weird house rules people are going to do. You can maybe do some stuff, like you can have options to turn on and off particular elements of it, and like that feels important. But for me, way more important is like thinking, what stuff do you actually need to enforce in the digital game? Like, do you need to enforce that people take it in turns to play? In the competitive mode you do, because it really matters who stacked a piece. But in the co-op version it doesn't matter, so you can do it there. You can play co-op, you can play with the house rule of you can only use your hand, or you can play with the house rules of, you've got to stack all of these pieces first. You can do all of this kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. So trying to leave the game open to people playing as they want to, I think is the easiest way to do it, mainly because it involves doing less work rather than more work. Yeah, anyone else have any questions? Or?
I know you mentioned some of the other games that you had seen that had used technology.
Yeah.
So when you were, I guess in the early stages of doing this, did you look to any other things that were out there for inspiration? Did you try to avoid doing that to sort of...
No, yeah. Definitely did as much kind of research as we could. And like I say, I come from a kind of weird experimental video game stuff, doing alternative controllers. So I was aware of a bunch of kind of previous how that space kind of looked. Definitely, I said with the Bluetooth thing, like we tried out like Osmo and all of those kind of things, like Anki Drive. So yeah, played around with that stuff just to kind of see like how does this work? How are they integrating this kind of physical stuff with the digital stuff? Yeah. So and then I was like, all of the Bluetooth connection things are shonky, for example. But yeah, also, frankly, Vista Balance was weird enough that there wasn't that much stuff you could kind of directly go, okay, yeah, this is how it should work. We also looked at a load of like just what stacking games are out there. Do they have any cool mechanics that we should reuse or recontextualize or steal? So yeah, but I don't know. I definitely am not a believer in that. Like, you should not play something to keep yourself kind of pure, unless there's another game that does something very similar to you, in which case maybe you want to look at it later, because otherwise you'll just find when you're trying to solve the same problems, you default to the same answers that they've got. Anyone else? Yeah, no, it's fine.
So you have the app, right, for Beast of Balance.
Yeah.
Is there a way that, or have you thought about anything, like if you want to, develop some change in the app that uses the same pieces, I don't know, a sequel, an expansion, something
Yeah.
that you can download, and then you just have to get the app, and you have the same stuff. Have you thought about maybe doing something like that? If you did, how would you get it to consumers, instead of...
Sure, yes. So the competitive mode, and this, I think this is an answer to your question. The competitive mode is just this. Yeah, but there is a competitive mode, and we pushed out an app update, and now there's a new game mode where you can play against each other.
Yeah. So we just pushed, spent a year making it, and then pushed a button, and then everyone got it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's updates.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we definitely were thinking we could just release separate apps. I think one idea we had was something we released at Christmas that uses the plinth, and it tells you how to mix eggnog. So you put the glass there, and then you press I put the glass there, and it says, okay, pour till this thing is filled. Okay, the tap was, yeah, because it's a weighing scale that's connected by Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And we also considered you could have different things, or we can use this as, again, this kind of platform play of get other people to make games that uses the same kind of core technology, which is kind of interesting and exciting. But
is it worth mentioning DIY mode as well? I mean, it's kind of a combination of both of those things. But when we were releasing the original Kickstarter, we had a DIY mode, which was everyone gets an RFID sticker that they can put on anything that they like. And so basically the way that it works is you have the plinth, you have your app, you put the thing that you want to put, you put the RFID chip sticker, and it's literally a sticker. You place it on, you scan it, it reads, you place it on the tower, you pick one of the beasts in the world, so it has to be a pre-programmed piece within the game, and then it programs. We were playing games with George would put a banana on it, come in as a shark. I would put on a Disney Infinity figure, and it would come in as an octopus. And yeah, I think in terms of that kind of household thing, but also that scope for exploration and play, right? There is an opportunity for a platform there for people to take these mechanics and mess around with them, do some kind of homebrew type games, which is super fun and something that you could currently do right now with the app.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
Because we talked a lot about Beast of Balance, which is obviously something you guys are very excited about. I'm actually curious about When in Rome. Working with Alexa, would you guys do that again?
Yeah, so we're currently, we're not concrete enough to say any of the things we're thinking about, but at the same time we are also definitely planning to make more games with that kind of platform and more kind of voice stuff there. It feels super exciting. And I think a lot, the big reason it feels super exciting for me is partly people have this technology anyway, so that's good. And also it fits really naturally to that thing of you're sitting around a table, you're paying attention to each other because it's a voice that comes from nowhere. You don't have to stare at the Alexa when it's speaking. So it feels like a natural thing to again have that. Also, again, it comes down to cost. When in Rome is deliberately much cheaper than Beast of Balance because Beast of Balance is a reasonably expensive thing to get. And honestly, the margins on When in Rome are much better than Beast of Balance because all of that electronics is a lot, and we obviously want to keep the price down to where people can afford it. But When in Rome, it turns out that making a game that involves cardboard and some meeples and some counters and stuff is a solved problem that people have got quite good at. But making a game that involves custom pieces that have RFID things and some custom electronics and a plinth and all of this stuff is a newer, more difficult problem that's more expensive to solve. Any more questions, or should we wrap up here?
Wrap up.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much for coming. I hope this was interesting or informative or one of those things. Feel free to come by the booth and say hi if you want to have a play on the game.
So the booth number is 356, kind of in the back corner. I reckon you probably need that one. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Cheers.